Asteroid of fear.
This is Amber McCrae with Connection Over Perfection. I'm also part of the Podcast Connection Network. Check out my show and other shows like the one you're about to listen to. The link is in the episode description.
Hey guys, welcome to another episode of the Men of the House podcast. And on today's episode, I have with me Amrit Singh. And we're going to talk a little bit about many different things, finding your purpose, how life is 100% your responsibility. We're going to talk about some meditation, kind of how he ended up here, and into ourselves as it relates to connecting with others. But then also, and you've heard this in many episodes, is why we can all benefit from having a coach or a mentor. And I know you've heard me say it before, but even Olympic swimmers, they have coaches. So the best of the best have coaches. And as Amrit said, not one of them got there without the coach. So yeah, let that sink in. But how you doing today?
Doing great. Thanks for having me, Richard.
Yes, thank you for coming on. I'm excited for this conversation. I've watched some of the interviews, other podcasts, and really like what you're about. So I'm excited for this, and I think the audience is going to be excited too. But let's start off with just getting a little bit about your background and kind of how you came into fruition of this place and finding your purpose and how why we're sitting here talking.
Yeah. Well, I had a pretty regular upbringing in Germany. And I was a normal teenager doing my thing. But then one of the things which I felt since I was a child was always this wanting to know more, like trying to understand the why, and are we on this planet? Why do we have this body? Why are we going to school? And it was always challenging for my parents to answer that, because they're just kind of like, that's kind of what we do.
Yeah.
It's like, yeah, okay, but why are we doing this? And then
What's the purpose? What's the purpose of?
What's the purpose, right? And then I wanted to know about God and religion and understand all that. And again, they didn't have a lot of answers. I mean, they had the book knowledge, right? The standard responses. And it wasn't really enough for me. I couldn't feel it. I didn't really, it wasn't mine. It was someone else's opinion. And then something interesting started when I was 15, 16. I got introduced to weed, and I started smoking weed, and suddenly I had this epiphany, right, where things open up, and I was like, oh my God, now I understand. Now I go deeper. Now I really feel who I am, what I am. And I was like, I solved it. I just had to smoke weed all day. So I did that for about 5, 6, 7 years, and not a lot happened. I felt very connected to myself and my purpose, but it didn't transform into action. So I just sat around smoking weed, getting stoned, watching TV. And then I got to the point where it's like, hey, this is unsustainable. I'm 22 years old. I'm a stoner. I'm not doing anything except getting high all day. And when I don't get high, then I feel disconnected. I feel like not alive, not real. And so I was like, okay, this is unsustainable. There must be other ways. So I got interested in spirituality. And it was very different in the 90s, right? You couldn't just, it's not like today where spirituality is everywhere and you can be on spiritual TikTok and get your full education from the most amazing people in the world who've done years and years of stuff. So it was very limited what was available. So I read a bunch of books, tried to understand things, opened my mind to new concepts, and then got introduced to Kundalini Yoga. And Kundalini Yoga is one of those yoga paths which is very intense and there's a lot of challenge in it, and it's really based on creating a foundation for deep meditation. So I got to this point where I was meditating so deeply, and I could feel the same thing which the weed was giving me. Oh. And I was like, wow, that's cool. Now I
Yeah.
can create the same feeling and I'm not stoned all day. And I can actually get stuff done and I can use this energy creatively. And so that was big breakthrough. Unfortunately, my whole circle of friends kept smoking weed, drinking alcohol, partying. And it was really hard to be the one kid who wanted to wake up early and meditate and eat a vegetarian diet. And so I got pulled back and forth over a period of years where I was able to really live this super healthy, clean life. And then I got pulled back by my friends. And then again, it's not fair to say got pulled back by my friends. What the right way to say it is, I allowed myself to get pulled back because I wanted to have that connection. I wanted to be with my friend group. And that was the point where I decided I need to leave. I need to leave Germany. I need to leave this energy I was living in. And I moved to India. And then in India, I lived with a community of other Kundalini yogis and Sikhs, and I learned about the religion of Sikhism, and I really connected deeply with it. Before that, I really was not a religious person. And I allowed myself this deep dive into the Sikh religion because it's more a lifestyle than a religion. I mean, it has that label of religion on it because, like all the religions, it's a way of putting it in a box, but it's much more like a lifestyle choice. And that's what I liked about it. And now I'm actually at a point where I wouldn't consider myself religious anymore. I wouldn't even consider myself a Sikh, even though I look like this with the beard and the turban. But this is really, I'm at a point now where I'm accepting it as part of me, right? I have long hair and the turban is super convenient, keeping the hair contained.
Right.
And plus it helps me in my meditation practice. And same way with the beard, right? It's kind of the natural state of our male body to grow hair on our face. And it's more of an unnatural state to stand there every single day cutting it off because society says, hey, this looks cleaner, this looks more professional, this blah, 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 whatever it is, right? Actually, in the last couple of years, the beard has kind of been coming into fashion. So people go meet me on the street and say, oh my God, what an amazing beard. I was like, yeah, I haven't cut it for 25 years. And they're like, oh my God, it's been 6 months. But it's an interesting thing because it kind of connects us more to ourselves, to our body. I know it's similar for women too, who have to live in this beauty ideal where they have to cut off every single hair on their body because it's considered not sexy or dirty or blah, 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 right? But ultimately what it comes down to when you look at that is it's really trying to recreate a body type of how we looked when we were 8 or 9, right? Without hair. That's how a 9-year-old looks. And so it's a little twisted, but we can go more into that.
Yeah, I had heard something on one of the episodes where you had talked about, is it having a chakra somewhere here?
Yeah, the moon
and
center sits right on your chin.
and that your hair kind of covers that, and
Well,
that, that the purpose
yeah,
of
there's a whole
that.
science behind it. And this is 5,000-year-old knowledge from the yogis in India who done a lot of meditation, a lot of internal practice, and they were able to figure these things about the body out, not by learning from someone else, but through experience, right? When you increase your sensitivity to such a high point, you can experience these very subtle nuances in your body. And a good example for that is how the Chinese figured out this thing with the meridians and the acupuncture, right? They were able to sense these energetic pathways in their own body and then in other people's bodies. And then also to understand which pathway and which point on each pathway creates what effect in the system, right? And this is really something we all can do as human beings, is to reconnect with that level of sensitivity that is given to us just by being human. And so, super cool thing. But let's get back to the beard. Is hair in its yogic explanation is like an antenna. So each hair on your body draws in sun energy. That's the basic understanding of it, right? So every area of your body that needs additional sun energy has hair on it. That's your head, that's your armpits, that's your eyebrows, that's your genitals, right? It's those areas where you're absorbing this sun energy. And it's really interesting because in the yogic tradition, the chin is the moon center, and the top of the head, the crown, is the sun center, right? It's kind of like on your t-shirt, the yin and yang. It's that balance between the two. Every aspect of our being has this balance. There's always a plus and a negative, a left and a right, right? This is part of this duality we're living in. So a good explanation to understand how the moon center works is the moon center is connected to your sensitivity, to your softness, to receiving energy, right? Versus the sun, which is very much this giving energy,
Giver.
pushing, like going out into the world, right? The moon reflects. So when you see someone when they're about to start crying, when they don't have a big beard like me, you can see their chin quiver. So that's that moon center getting activated. And that creates then the crying, and it's a full experience, right? So now putting all these pieces together, the reason why as men, and not as boys and not as women, but as men, we grow a beard right smack on the moon center is because it helps us as men to be more stable, to be more balanced, to be more in equilibrium, to bring in that sun energy into our moon center. And so it's really just a technical aspect of the body. So as you're cutting this hair off regularly, your body goes like, oh my God, he cut it off again. Let me put in energy and regrow this important piece of this physical body. Because like with all the advances we've made in medicine and research and science, we still haven't figured out how our body works, right? Really like the intricacies of how it all plays together and all these aspects. And so it's really just accepting the fact that your body knows, right? Like when you have a cut on your arm, your body knows how to heal it. Sure, you can help clean it up, make sure it doesn't get dirty, but your body will heal it. Modern medicine cannot heal your cut. They can just support your body to allow for this to happen. So it takes a couple of days and your body healed it. So it's the same way with the beard. Your male body wants to grow hair in that location. And so you can now argue with that and say like, no, I don't like it. I want to look pretty and like a 10-year-old. Or you can say, there must be a reason my body wants hair there. So I'm leaving it.
So it got me to thinking, like what you talked about, kind of where you started and to where you are now, and being able to explain this kind of stuff. What was it like when you first got to India, and how did you knew you needed to leave Germany and change that location? Did you have contacts in India prior? And what was it like getting off there and getting assimilated? And kind of were you overwhelmed? Were you excited to learn? And what was when you first got there, what was what was your daily life like? How did you get immersed in it with the community? And what was a typical day like?
It was definitely challenging, to say the least. I mean, I had this whole idea of India and what it's going to be like. And then I very quickly realized, oh my God, this was something completely different. I went to volunteer at an international boarding school, which was created from this Kundalini Yoga community. And so that was my entry point. I was interested in working with teenagers and felt so misunderstood when I was a teenager. So I felt like there was a lot of opportunity for me to grow there. And my life changed very quickly. I mean, we would go to bed early, wake up at 4 or 5 in the morning, practice yoga, meditate together for an hour and a half, and then we just have a normal workday, right? When you run a school, there's a lot of stuff that's happening that needs to be taken care of. The kids need to be managed, especially living with 100 teenagers. It's a
Oh,
whole
yeah.
nother level of challenge. And then we had these pieces built in where in the evening we would all come together and meditate for half an hour. And so this community aspect and this focus on self, this focus on creating time to go in deep was really transformational for me, because it allowed me to really feel myself and why am I here and what am I doing and what's going on inside of me, because I had these times in the morning and evening which were just dedicated for connecting with myself.
Was there, so you knew that you had kind of transformed a little bit in Germany because you had talked about kind of going back and forth, that you you were able to make this connection and kind of gain that feeling and connection to self that weed had brought you in the beginning. And then you're like, okay, I need more of this. I need to level up. I'm going to go to India. And then, of course, you're immersed in that culture there, and it's very different. And you're getting in more reps, and now you're around very similar people. Did you have a point when you were in India that you were like, or do you remember the point that you're like, wow, this is what it's about? Like, I thought I was onto something over here, but now I really understand where that
That's
shift was.
well, that's fun how you're saying it, because I definitely got to the point where I was like, wow, now I really understand. And then a couple more years passed and I realized, oh my God, I really don't understand. So, but it's a journey, and it's kind of like this cycle, and it's as you're moving upward, it turns into this spiral, right? Where you come to this point, it's like, oh, wow, now I really understand. And then a whole nother world opens up and you realize how little you understand.
Yes. I always say every time you level up, then the real work begins.
Yeah, yeah. And it's exciting. I mean, it's really, for me, one of the reasons I left India after 20 years of living there and raising my family and being very comfortable in my work and everything was because I was so comfortable and I got to a plateau where there was not a lot of growth. And so leaving India and going out into the world and carrying all these learnings and what I experienced into the world really just started a whole nother world and a whole nother challenge. And it's been super exciting.
So when you that 20 years you were in India, what were you doing there in terms of, you started off at the school, the yoga school, you got deeper into that, and how did your life kind of evolve during that 20 years? Like, what were you doing as a profession? What were you doing in terms of deepening your practice with yoga or
I
as a
was doing a
yogi?
lot. I mean, it was 20 years. So I started a family, I got married, right? I mean, I had 2 kids in India. A lot of stuff happened. I worked at the school for the entire 20 years. And I kind of started out as this volunteer to the assistant to the assistant of someone. And I ended up being the director of residential life, which meant a lot of responsibility and really taking care of a lot. And so that was an interesting development professionally. But over all those years, I always found myself sitting one on one with people and either coaching students or coaching my staff or working through it. And so I have been coaching people really for the last 25 years, but I wasn't really calling it coaching, right? I was
Right.
just thinking, I saw a person who was struggling. So I sat with them and I helped them find their path, helped them find their purpose, why they were there, why they were doing what they were doing. And they always walked away with a big smile on their face and say, oh my God, it's so great talking with you. And I thought, like, I didn't say a lot, just ask you a couple of good questions and got you thinking. And I got you to this process. And so when I left India, I knew my passion was to do more of that. And so I went full time into coaching. And that's what I do now, where I work one-on-one with people, or also very specifically with men who are struggling in their relationships. But I do really love working with everybody. I got a lot of female clients too who work one-on-one with me. And I just love the journey of another human being that has a dream, that has a goal, and really knows they want to do it. They can't bring themselves to get there because of all their limitations, which have brought them to where they're at today. That's why they didn't make it any further than where they're at today, is because of our limiting beliefs, blind spots, all these things. And I mean, same goes for me. I got 2 coaches I'm working with because I understand that for me as a coach, I also need a coach because I have my own blind spots. I have my own limiting beliefs. And even though I have a ton of knowledge in the field, I do need someone to hold up the mirror and allow me to see what's blocking me. And so that's what I do with my clients. And it's super rewarding. And I love the work I do.
Now, did you always have coaches and mentors along the way, or is it kind of shifted? Like, since you've broken out on your own, you now kind of have to seek it. But I would guess in the environment you were in, immersed and surrounded in yoga and the school, that mentors and whatnot came very naturally.
Yeah. Oh, I always had mentors. I always had teachers. I always had, in India, it's called the gurus, right? And
Yeah.
it's a cool word, the word guru, because when you break it down, the first part, gu, means darkness, and ru means light. So it's really just someone who helps you get from your own darkness into your own light. That's the whole idea of what having a guru means. And it's actually a really helpful tool. Unfortunately, over the last 50 years, it developed something different out of it, right? It's like, oh, the guru says something and I'm doing it and I'm not questioning it. I'm not asking myself. And that's problematic, right? The moment you get there, it becomes a cult. It becomes a mind control. And that doesn't have to be religious or in any way, but there's many ways where there's these guru figures who just say something and then people go like, oh, I have to do it because that person said it. That's not healthy, right? But if you can use that original word, right? What does the guru do? It helps you to come from your own limitations into a world of expanding yourself by using different techniques. So that's what I like about the word guru.
How's the process of going inside and learning all these, gaining a deeper self connection, how has that helped you to connect to others?
It's really important to learn to know yourself and to connect to yourself. And it's easy to connect to the parts that you like about yourself, right? Right. Oh, I'm hardworking, I'm responsible, I'm honest. Oh, yeah, I'm such a great person. But then you're also these other things, right? I'm hard to deal with sometimes. I got an ego going, all these.
Oh, yeah.
And those things, we like to push them aside and just pretend they're not there. And so I really did a lot of shadow work to recognize what are those things which I don't want to show, where in my authentic self, which is the whole combination, again, the yin and the yang, right? It's not just the things which I think are good, but it's also these other parts of myself. And the more accepting I became of my shadow and of my not so great traits, I got a chance to look at them. I got a chance to work with them, because now I was not shoving them into the corner, but I allowed them to come up and just say, okay, does that serve me? Does that serve me relate to my wife, to my kids, to people in the world? And if it didn't serve me, then again, I wouldn't just shove it away, but I would work on it. And I would try to figure out why I'm reacting in that way. And that brings us to taking 100% responsibility, right? Because in that moment where you can't just say anymore, oh, the reason I'm in a bad mood is because of my wife, no matter what she did.
Right.
But you say the reason I'm in a bad mood is because what my wife did triggered something inside of me, and I decided to be in a bad mood. So now you got two things to work with. You can work on your triggers, right? Work on why that is triggering you. It's usually something from our childhood. And then B, you can work on how you want to express that into the world, how you want to choose. Do you want to choose to be angry? Do you want to choose to become quiet and go take care of yourself? Do you want to choose to be kind and nice? That's all your choice. And so it really doesn't matter what your wife or your kids or your boss or whoever does or says. You are 100% responsible for what comes next.
How long did it take for you to kind of accept those bad parts? What was the process like? And do you ever still battle with maybe not accepting it or pushing it away a little bit?
Oh,
Or
every day, of course, because it's our human tendency to want to be liked, to want to be the nice guy, to want to be blah blah blah, whatever, want to be right, want all these things. But it's really this. It's something which I'm not done with. The interesting thing is, as you start working on the big ones, which kind of really change the path of your life, and you get a handle on those, you realize how much is behind that. I would probably say I do get less triggered now, but I still catch myself getting triggered. And for me, I always call it the wanting to kick the dog example. I'm an animal lover, dog and cat, and if I could have 10 more animals, I would. And so in my true identity, I would never even think about hurting an animal. So when I catch myself getting so upset because of something, again, usually it's what my wife did, and then I'm so upset with her, then the music my neighbors play bother me, and then I see the dog and I'm like, oh, now the dog is right. That's when I realized, usually by that point, when I get upset at the dog, which I love so much, oh my God, something is off with me. And I didn't notice it for the last 45 minutes. I was just thinking I'm so right and all these people are messed up, but to come to that point to then just go, and that's why I call it the wanting to kick the dog. When it comes to that level, that's when the light bulb goes on in my head and I'm like, oh, I better go and do something to recalibrate myself, because the problem is not the neighbor with the music. It's not my wife. It's not the dog. It's me.
now, when you got to do something about it, so obviously you do some meditation and yoga. Do you employ any other techniques? Do you journal? What other kinds of things do you do besides kind of a meditation and yoga? And I had a question with that is, I know I traditionally think of yoga as being poses. Now, when you mentioned Kundalini Yoga and then meditation, are they similar? Are you meditating as you're doing yoga? How does that work? And is that one of the things you use to kind of ground you? And do you do anything else like journaling?
Or it's a bigger answer, because I kind of want to touch on meditation, because meditation is such a common theme. And everybody talks about meditation, and the most successful CEOs
The right way to do it, the wrong way to do
right.
it.
The Olympic swimmer will meditate before he goes into the pool and is in the perfect mindset, and all this stuff around meditation. And what most people think meditation is to sit quietly for 6 hours and not move a muscle. Great. Yeah. That is an awesome place to get to, right? When you can get to reconnecting to yourself so deeply that you can sit for 6 hours, not move a muscle, and actually enjoy it, you've accomplished something. But meditation is so much more. And what I always tell people who tell me, oh, I can't meditate. I tried meditation once and I gave up after 2 minutes. It just doesn't work for me. I can't do it. I remind them of that we as human beings are natural meditators, every single one of us. Before we were born in our mother's belly, all we did was meditate, right? We would even do a headstand and be in that posture and go through this deep, sensual, spiritual experience of growing the body. And so the only thing we could do for that entire period of while our mother was pregnant with us was meditate. And then we're born into the world, and that's a challenge, right? Now suddenly you're disconnected. You're not in this warm floating cocoon anymore. You're like, there's light, there's sounds, there's cold, there's like hunger. You poop your diaper. I mean, it's challenging for those poor little babies, right? But then when the mother takes them and nurses them, you can see their eyes roll up to their third eye point, and they go into this deep state of meditation. And every baby does this. And it's so powerful that it affects the mother, where the mother will go into a state of meditation just because the baby is meditating so deeply. And it's so powerful that any person that walks into the room and has a relatively okay sense of sensitivity will pick up on that and also get pulled into this meditative space where they will speak quietly and they whisper, and they are just being in this, really experiencing that.
Hey, after you're done listening to this amazing podcast, be sure to give it a 5-star rating, then go check out the other podcasts in the Podcast Connection Network, including my own, Everything's Connected. Check us all out. The link will be in the episode's description.
So the reason I'm telling this story is I don't believe for a second that any one person on this planet is not a meditator, because we have all done it for months or years while we were little. And then we kind of forget about it because our parents didn't meditate, our grandparents didn't meditate. It was not part of the culture. And then it was kind of shoved into this narrow little area of religion, right? Because the religious people would do something. They would either do prayer or sing together or do some sort of meditative practice. And so people were like, oh my God, that must be because my God is so much better than all the other gods. Right. And because I have this great experience when I go to my temple, to my church, to my synagogue, right? And so what I kind of want to promote is that we don't need those tools. We don't need religion. We don't need spirituality. We don't need to wear a turban. We don't need to have a beard. We're all naturally meditators. And that's our true identity. And the moment we can connect with that, that's when that place opens up. One of the reasons why plant medicine has become so popular over the last 10, 15 years is because people are taking a substance and now suddenly they're connecting with an aspect of themselves that was already there, right? Because it's not the ayahuasca making you feel something. It's not the mushrooms that create something. They're just triggering something that is already there, which you were not able to access because you're so distracted with your phone, you drink too much coffee, you never exercise, you don't sleep enough, all those things. That's why you're disconnected from that aspect of yourself. And now suddenly you're doing an ayahuasca ceremony and you're saying like, oh my God, this plant did all this. No, your body did this. The plant just triggered it because it allowed for your body to experience this, what you can experience without.
Oh, I was actually thinking about that while you were talking about that. I was thinking of plant medicines, and you said when you used weed, that was kind of that first. Yeah, I can remember too. It's like you're connected to yourself in a different way. Or if you do psychedelics, you have like that third eye of like, hey, this is what's really important. This is what really matters. And all this other crap I've been worrying about doesn't matter. And so I definitely, in some of the parts of your story that I've heard in the interviews and even here in this episode was how you use the weed and then that gave you that connection, just like people use the plant medicine. But then it was attempting to get to that place without it. Like, and the way you described it is it's not the mushrooms, it's not necessarily the weed, it's what was inside of you that just triggered it and kind of woke it up.
Yeah.
So how do you what are your thoughts on plant medicine and people utilizing it, especially like for addictions or moving forward? Or yeah, what's your thoughts on it? Do you think
I think
it's
it's great, honestly. I think one of the reasons those plants grow on our planet is because they're there to be experienced, they're there to be used. And so I think plant medicine is great because what it does is it allows you to feel what's real. Like you were describing, right? When you had this opening up of the third eye, and now suddenly all these things you were worrying about just 2 hours earlier, suddenly it seems so trivial and so unimportant. And that's because that's your true state of being. The problem now becomes when you can't integrate that experience. And especially for kids or teenagers who like take mushrooms to go to rave or take
right.
LSD or do MDMA or whatever. And they're like, oh my God, I'm feeling so great and jumping around and run. And there's no time and space to integrate. And they just want to feel like that again the next week. And so they take it again. And then they just keep doing it over and over. And that's what becomes a problem. That's exactly what happened to me with the weed, where I was like, I love how I feel. Now you just have to smoke weed all day. And then you get all the side effects. And then you get all the heaviness from it. And that's the issue.
It's like
And
a
so,
tool.
huh?
It's like a tool. And like any
Yeah, it's
medicine,
like a tool. I would almost call it, it's like a crutch, right?
well,
A crutch.
you wouldn't take Tylenol every day. So it's like, why would you take weed or mushrooms every day?
Right. It's the same thing, right? When you use this crutch, so you can walk because you had a broken foot and it really allows you some mobility and to get around. But then you like that crutch so much that you say, oh, I'm going to use this crutch for the next 50 years. It's awesome. I always got this crutch with me, right? But the goal needs to be to come to the place where you can put the crutch in the corner and say, I have learned from the crutch what it got to teach me. And now I'm going to practice doing this on my own so I can walk without the crutch.
Like physical therapy almost for the
Exactly. Yeah.
spirit. You
Yeah.
know,
It's a spiritual therapy.
you go into it with a crutch and then you repair whatever needs to be repaired and you get off the crutch, but your inner self, just like your body, it doesn't heal without the work and a little bit of pain and a little bit of suffering in between the crutch and getting back to walking on your own.
Exactly. And that's why it's also so important after taking plant medicine to allow for time to integrate before you take it again, because now you know what that high feels like. And now you're coming back to your reality. And now suddenly those things are important again, right? Which were trivial just 12 hours
Right.
ago. And you're like, what's wrong with me? Like, why can't I just stay there? Because it takes work, right? It takes self-reflection. It takes diving deeper. And that's again where the help of a coach or a therapist or some body worker can really help you integrate those things, because again, you have someone who helps you reflect things back to you and see things more clearly. But now you got a goal. Now you know you want to feel. You can experience happiness and what your real identity is like.
What's been something, so I know 20 years is a long time, but thinking of that 15-year-old boy who wanted to know more in that journey, what's kind of been one of the biggest things, maybe a lesson that you've learned from this journey?
Probably for me, the biggest lesson is that it was all there already, right? From when I was 3 or 4 or 5 years old, a little kid, and all the gifts, all the knowledge, all the wisdom, everything already was there. I couldn't articulate, I couldn't put it together, but this journey really for me over the last 50 years of my life has been a journey of rediscovery and reconnection to my true identity. And every time I just get a little bit closer, it just feels more real. I feel more in myself, in my body, in this experience on this planet, in my spirit and in my connection with the earth, with the heavens, and just being more whole. Rather than, I still remember when I was 20, 21, I felt so disconnected. I couldn't fit in. I couldn't figure stuff out. It was like things were so overwhelming, emotions were overwhelming, and it was a lot. And it's interesting because now I see my daughter go through it. She's 16 and she's trying to figure stuff out, right? And she's like, the other day we were talking about it, and she's like, oh my God, it's so fucking hard to be a human being.
Mhm.
We're like, yeah, exactly. I'm 50. It's still hard for me. I got all these tools I got working for me, but it's really challenging. And that's where we go more into the spiritual realm. But really, Earth is one of those really challenging places to incarnate and to have an experience. And it's really, it's like highest level of experience. And so to come here and to get a human body and go through this experience is really rough. And we're all struggling, every single one of us. If it's about money, about relationships, about our health, about our happiness, about not drinking too much, not doing that, not doing the things we know that are good for us. I mean, the list is so long, but there's not one person on this planet who's not struggling, right? Even if you go all the way to the top and say, like, even the Dalai Lama, that's this massive meditative practice, he still bangs his foot when he goes to the bathroom and got a bruise on his toe and is limping to his next lecture, right? It's part of this experience on this planet, and it's super challenging. But to the point where my spiritual teacher would always talk about that. He said to us, you guys don't understand how special that is to have a human body, how special that is to have a human incarnation. The angels are jealous of you guys because you got to experience this duality. You got to experience joy and pains and ups and downs and challenges and overcoming challenges. It's one of the most special things you can do in this universe. So I love that.
Man, how do you, well, given your daughter's grown up with you her whole life and she knows kind of what you do, what you're about, how do you, what's your approach to teaching her about these things, these practices? I know with my 10-year-old, sometimes if she gets angry or something, I'll send her a little text, or I'll even write it on the bathroom mirror in a wipe away marker. Nothing good has ever come from anger. Or, hey, I'm telling you this because I love you and I don't want you to share the same mistakes I did. I want you to have better than me. How do you incorporate your teachings and what you've learned to your daughter or your children?
Well, I worked with teenagers for 20 years, so I did get a lot of practice, which was great because I got to practice with all those different age groups, which gives me a big advantage now going into the teenage years with my kids. My son is 12, my daughter is 16. So I've dealt with a lot of 16-year-old girls. I've dealt with a lot of 12-year-old boys. So I do understand it well. And I also know what's going to be different by 13 and 17. And the biggest thing I learned is telling them stuff never works. Right? Like, think back to when you were 16. Like, did you listen to one thing your parents said to you? No. It's so boring, right? It's like, there he goes again, blah, 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 talking to me with my anger, blah, blah, blah. And then look at him. Like, I saw him when he talked to mom the other day, or he thought I didn't listen, right? And so what's real is, what I realized in relationship with her is I stopped telling her stuff because it really doesn't add to our relationship. When I go into lecturing mode and I so and that's probably all she hears anyway.
Right.
When I start talking. So I find myself accepting the fact that I'm a living example and that she will copy what I do. And that means when I sit and I meditate for 2 hours in the morning, she will see that every single day. And that gets saved into her hard drive, into her memory, and she might come back to that one day. At the same time, she will also pick up on my bad habits. When I'm on my phone for 3 hours a day, she will do the same because she sees me being on my phone. So I'm not having conversations with her about her phone time if I'm not willing to put my phone away. Right. And so that's what I found was the most powerful thing. And again, it comes back to 100% responsibility. Stop talking to your kids about stuff you want them to do differently. Do things differently yourself. Live your best life possible. And guess what? Your kid's going to copy you.
Well said. I agree. How do you raise your energy without anything external, any of the stimulants?
What works really well is meditation, because it's interesting, because it's not so much of raising my energy through meditation. It's more dropping all those heavy weights of worry, of concern, of ego, of, oh, I got hurt, this, that, right? As I'm dropping these things, as I'm going deep in my meditative practice, my energy rises by itself. Because again, the human body, the human state is that of highly raised energy. That's who we are as human beings, right? That's our natural state. Unfortunately, with the distractions of the world, with an 8-hour job you hate, with your partner who you hate, your life that you hate, and like all these challenges, your energy just keeps dropping. And that's when you're then stuck and you feel shitty and you don't want to get out of bed. It's because of those outside pressures that you allowed to affect you. And so as you're processing that and you say, hey, maybe I need to do something about this job that I hate. Maybe I need to find a different job. Maybe I need to approach my job differently. Same thing with a relationship. Why am I living with a person that I don't like? Just so I can raise the kids for another 10 years and then we get divorced? That's horrible. It's a horrible example for your kids. Yeah. But then at the same time, to say, okay, I want to take responsibility for this relationship because I want to be here for another 10 years because of my kids. It's important to me. But I also want to be here for myself. And I also want to be here for my wife because I don't want her to live with someone she doesn't like because he treats her shittier than any other person on this planet. So again, back 100% responsibility. What can I do today to work on my relationship? Can I take a course? Can I join a program? Can I get a coach? Can I read a book? How can I improve what I do in the relationship? And funny enough, what you'll see is suddenly your wife starts changing. Suddenly she treats you differently because you are taking responsibility for your peace.
For anyone who wants to start with a meditation, if somebody's a total beginner, where's a good starting point? What do you recommend they start with, try, focus? Is it your typical sit somewhere with your legs crossed and do this, or sit still in a chair? What do you recommend for a starting point for beginners?
It really depends on who it is. Right? There's some people who are very much in the outside world. The people at the party who talk to everybody and who have like 8 cups of coffee and they're like, whoa, whoa, whoa. You have a person like that and you want them to meditate. Oh my God, it's really challenging for them. And if you tell them to sit down, they're going to go crazy. So for someone like that, my recommendation would be spend time in nature. Go in the forest, go for a walk, enjoy not having headphones in, not listening to an audiobook, not distracting yourself, looking at your phone every 3 minutes and answering messages or doing emails, but really just start by being present. And a great way of being present is doing something by yourself, right? Go on a lake in a boat, go in a forest, go sit at home and just enjoy that it's raining outside and listen to the birds. that would be my recommendation to start a meditation practice. And funny enough, going back to plant medicine, that's the kind of stuff you want to do. If you're high on mushrooms, you don't want to like be on your phone answering emails. You want to be in nature. You want to connect. You want to touch the ground. You want to be with people that are uplifting and high energy. Same thing, right? So that's how you're combining these two sides. And then to kind of complete this, if you have someone who has a very calm personality, who's very slow, Ayurveda, we have this Vata, Pitta, Kapha things, right? There's someone who's very Kapha, who's more heavy. For someone it's very easy to learn how to meditate. You say, hey, just sit there for 20 minutes and close your eyes and focus on your breath. They're like, oh, only 20 minutes? Okay, no problem. And they'll sit there. Some beginner who never done meditation in his life, but they'll be able to sit for 20 minutes and just listen to their breath and go deep. So you kind of, probably everybody lies somewhere on the spectrum of these two extremes. So you need to be a little kind and compassionate with yourself and say, if I'm a very active, outgoing person, no, starting with long, deep meditation where you don't move is counterproductive, because you will not make it through 5 minutes. Or you might force yourself to make it through 10, but then you hate meditation for the rest of your life.
Yeah, I think the idea, like, even for me, I've worked on a few different things of trying to change morning routine a little bit, and maybe wake up early, not look at the phone, and sit still in a chair that I have that's comfortable. But in the mornings, I'm congested. There's different things, and I end up thinking about everything but calming. I'm like, man, I'm so congested, I can't. And so for me, I learned the other day, I think I was on a walk in nature, and I said to myself, like, look, you hear a lot of people say, this is what I do and this is what makes me successful. But also, I look at myself and I go, I know my strengths. When I wake up in the morning, I'm an output person in terms of catching up on back end stuff for the podcast, this, that, the other. My meditation time, whether it's my walk, being able to sit still and focus, is later in the day. And sometimes it's the go out in nature for a walk, and sometimes it's the sit still. But giving myself grace and understanding and going, look, whatever is best for you, and not this other person who preaches their successful routine. I mean, it may work for you, it may not, but you also have to look at your own life, your own individuality, what works for you, understand when your energy is high for outputting things and when your energy is more for receiving.
Yeah, exactly.
And but I think you said it well with, kind of giving yourself that compassion, understanding that you might be on either end at any given point, and at some point you might be somewhere in between, and that it doesn't have to be this traditional, what we think of sitting with arms in a crossed position like a yogi, that it can kind of take on many forms. But one of the things it would seem like so much like you wouldn't be anywhere near in the terms of whether it's self-enlightenment or where you are in your life had you not taken this journey. But I like to ask people something along the way that's been like a surprised blessing that never would have happened if you'd never taken that step, that leap of faith, trusting your intuition of going, this is something I need to do for me. I need to go to India. And because of that, XYZ has happened. And one could argue to say your whole life wouldn't have happened had you not made that step.
Yeah.
But what's one thing that stands out that never in a million years did you think it would happen, but it happened because you trusted that intuition and took that leap?
I think going to India is probably the biggest one. And it was scary. It was scary to say, I'm moving to India. Like, I didn't even know.
What did your parents think?
It was interesting because...
And what do they think of you now, too? Now that they've seen... they had a
there was
thought
this
when you
interesting
moved.
phase in the beginning.
Yeah.
Because I I'm very black and white in that way.
Mhm.
I'm a Scorpio in my astrology, so I'm all in when I do something new I'm excited about. So I was wearing a big turban, I was wearing a white dress, I was getting up at 5 a.m. I had this vegetarian diet, said, oh, we can't eat any meat anymore. And like, and they're like looking at me going like, wow, this is really a big transformation this guy's going through. And he looks really weird. I'm trying to grow my beard. I'm tying this turban. Everybody in Germany on the street was staring at me. And then my mom said something to me. She's like, look, this is super weird. I don't understand half of what you're doing and why you're doing it. But what I see and feel is so much better than what I saw 2 months ago when you were smoking and drinking and going out for parties, and that I'm getting into cocaine and doing all that shit, right? She's like, I'm 100% with the weird version. So anything you need, my support, you got it. And that was so real for me, where I was like, okay, I looked in the mirror and I was, oh my God, I look so weird.
Yeah.
But it was really the essence of me was not this low energy depleted person who could only have fun when I was high, versus someone who was really actively working on improving myself. And so she could see the difference. She said, look, you're on the right path. Keep doing what you're doing. I'll support you with whatever you need.
And then you moved to India, and what were their thoughts initially?
Oh, it was a couple months after I had done that transition. And so by that point, they were like, yeah, go for it. Do it. We'll support you. And it was really great to have that support. My dad was struggling with it, right? Because he came from a different background, and it was definitely much more challenging for him. But I think he could also relate to that essence, not as much as my mom, but who could see that there's something in there. Even though he didn't understand it, there was something in there that made sense.
And as the process kind of went along, when you ended up the more complete version where you are now, what are the thoughts? Have y'all ever discussed
I wouldn't
it?
say I'm even close to the complete version, but completer.
Yes, more completer. Has there ever been any discussion of what the journey's been like with them? Have they ever asked you about it, or?
Not much, no. And I mean, it's such a complex subject that even putting it into words is complicated, right? Because how do you describe this development of reconnecting with your true essence of self? Because it was there all the time. It's just coming back to it and clearing the layers, right? Like get through another layer and being like, oh my God, I can't believe my ego is still doing this. And just accepting it.
Yeah, it's like you got to get past everything that the world puts on you.
Yeah, and you're allowed to get past it, because I still get stuck on stuff all the time. But then when I allow myself to just pass it by, then I've completed another level, and it's cool. And it's definitely not going to come to an end, and I'm going to ascend into the heavens as an enlightened being because it's about the journey. We already started as enlightened beings, but the reason we came on this planet and took this physical form is because we wanted to process, and we wanted to go through this separation and feel duality and do all this. So it always bugs me a little bit when people, and I've been there too, not just once, several times over the last 30 years, where I'm like, oh, I want to get closer to enlightenment. It's when you see that hippie spiritual community where everybody talks like that. It's like, yeah, you just have to uplift your energy through your chakras and breathe it away. And it's like, I'm like, fuck that. That's like the worst stuff, because it's not about that. That's so fake and superficial. It's about feeling the pain. It's about feeling the frustration. It's about saying like, oh my God, just yesterday I felt like kicking my dog. And to accept that fact and say like, okay, let me work on that. Where did that come from? Where inside of me is that? And that's more real and more authentic than all the woo-woo blah blah bullshit.
So what do you got? What are you working on for the future? Is there anything? What are you looking for the next 5 years out? Are you any books? You're going to continue, I know, continue coaching, helping others, lightening yourself, but any major plans or anything you want to work on or pursue?
Well, I'm in an interesting phase right now because we left India, then we moved to Germany for 2.5 years. Now we live in Mexico for the last 3 years almost. And it's kind of like I'm feeling I'm resettling, right? And I'm recreating a base. And so I really focus on my personal practice, on going for my walks, on just connecting with myself more authentically. Because I realized that's the foundation of everything. That's the foundation of every single client I serve. The deeper I'm connected with my own essence, the more real and the more powerful is the process for my clients. So that's where my energy goes. And that's for me the most important thing.
How'd you choose Mexico?
My wife is Mexican.
Okay.
Yeah. And she left Mexico when she was 17 and she had never been back. And so it was one of her big dreams. And also for the kids to learn from this culture. And now they're trilingual. It's such an amazing blessing.
Now, do you think, I mean, it was kind of a weird thought, but like when people relocate and they move, like you said, like reestablishing a base, part of that is also, do you make that point to kind of connect to the place that you're at? Like when you went from India back to Germany and then into Mexico, do you feel an energy and you make that effort to connect? And part of that integrating that is part of that, creating that baseline, that foundation of where you're going to go, like in
Yeah, I
this new
mean,
chapter.
we're all human beings. So it's an interesting experience because we get so deeply influenced by the people who are around us and who we hang out with and how they live their life. And so when you live by yourself in the same city for your whole life with the same people around you, that never changes. But as you go into the world and you live in different places, you experience something different. And it's really an amazing tool to just experience yourself at a deeper level, because now your mirror has changed, right? The surrounding has changed. Different aspects in yourself get stimulated and triggered. And so it's really powerful experience. It's something I would recommend to everybody. Say, like, go live somewhere else every couple of years, because it really is a huge spiritual practice to integrate yourself into a new life and into a new world. And because what happens in that moment is you can see yourself clearer, right? It's like as you're moving yourself through these different cultures and different places to live, you recognize what things stay the same, that's you, and what things change, which is your surrounding. And it's been a big part of my spiritual journey to live in different places.
I think too, it's also important to recognize and understand that sometimes you can move all the places you want, but it's really you that needs to move within yourself and change some things, and that it's not actually the place. And I never wanted to live kind of in the hometown where I grew up. I graduated high school a year early, joined the Navy, and left at 17. And I've been back a couple of times, but coming back in 2015 and having been here 9 years and having my child here, and I love the school she goes to and what she's exposed to. And for the first time, I actually feel a sense of peace and comfort in the place that I grew up. I
No,
always felt
really.
so different
Yeah.
and whatnot before and out of place. But it's weird the past several years. And as I looked at other opportunities and other places, I've actually come to settle in and enjoy and appreciate where I'm actually at. And it's been it's weird.
No,
in
it's
a
it's
way.
perfect, and it's perfect for you at this time. Doesn't mean it has to be perfect in 5 or 10 years from now. And so
Right.
that's the beautiful thing of living in the now, is to say, today, here and now, I would choose to live here. That's a really great sign that you're living in the right place. But what happens in the future is a whole nother
Yeah.
thing. So
I never ever thought in a million years that I would be like, oh, I'm actually okay with this. I love like
actually
the
liking it.
layout, the amount of traffic. I love the school my daughter goes to, and it's like I don't I don't care that there's not an in and out on every corner. I don't care that there's not this or that.
Yeah.
Because the thing is I can always go and get some of these things I miss. And then in 10 years, those things will probably come to me and come here anyway.
Yeah.
So it's like it doesn't really matter and it's pointless. The thing is it's at the pace I like, it's everything I like, and I'm like, I'm happy to be in a place of contentment because I struggled with it for so years. I mean, that's why I graduated a year early and left the place
Mm.
because I felt like there was no opportunity and only returned intermittently for different things, but it's
And that was the perfect thing for you to do. Imagine you would have not left at that time, how miserable you would have been. And so, just as coming back is the right thing for you now, who knows where your life's going to take you? You might live all over the place or travel the world and do things. But for now, this is the right thing. And I had this very similar feeling while I was in India. I think it's something which happens for us humans naturally when we have little kids. We want that foundation for our small kids because they need to put roots down. They need to have continuity and routines, and that's really what helps them. And traveling the world with little kids, as cool as that sounds, in my opinion, is not a good thing. Being stationary is definitely much more helpful. And then comes that age, and it happens for you now with your kid being 10, 12, where they want to see the world. And then it gets super exciting to go out and do different things because they have that foundation.
yeah, that's the idea is she's going to be a fifth grader and their school only goes to eighth grade. And I'm like, when high school starts, I'm like, I'd rather just get a van, drive around to wherever, travel, let her homeschool, work on the podcast, interview interesting people, and see history instead of reading about it,
Yeah.
see places, see culture. So yeah, that's the goal in the next 5 years. That way
Super
she'd
cool.
be
I love it.
14, 15 and be able to actually experience. And I think you understand why people are the way they are, why places are the way they are when you can go and interact because you joined the military at a very young age and had my 19th birthday overseas in Japan. And it's just different.
And it's probably a party you will never forget.
No, no, definitely not. But as we come to a close, do you have any questions for me?
No, not really. I really enjoyed it. It was a great experience to go through this podcast with you. And thank you for making it possible.
Yes, thank you. I learned a lot, gave me a lot to think about, and which makes it exciting to edit because I get to listen to it again. And but I think one of the most understanding, I think that that energy, that connection to self is always in there, and that sometimes the plant medicine just wakes it up, that it's not actually that was kind of one of the things I learned, gave me some understanding on as I've experienced my own journey with psychedelics and cannabis,
Yeah.
but to understand that and what it means to me,
Yeah. And
definitely
maybe just
eye-opening.
for me, from my experience, to share a practical tip here is actually one of the biggest challenges with, especially with cannabis, is that you always want to chase the next high, right? And then you
Right.
smoke more and more. And then the next day you have to smoke more. And then like 6 months in, you're like, oh my God, I'm smoking so much weed. Where's that all going? And then you remember that first day when you smoked after you hadn't for like a month or two, and you really got high from that regular
Mhm.
small amount. So my recommendation here is to find that microdose and find that smallest possible dose. And this works best when you stop for a couple of days and then you just say, okay, I'm just going to take 1 or 2 puffs of this joint and then put it away and see. And then really practice sensitivity and realize, oh my God, I'm feeling so much from this microdose. Why would I want to smoke the whole joint? Just so I'm like in the couch? Not
Yeah,
able
the
to-
idea is to get enlightened, not to get obliterated.
Right, exactly. And so this is really this thing to practice with it, because then something interesting happens. Then comes the point where you're like, oh, I would like to smoke more now. And then you really ask yourself, am I doing this to connect with my higher self, or I'm doing this to get stoned? And again, no right or wrong answer here, no
Right.
judgment. If you just want to be hammered and lie on your sofa and not be able to move your arms, go for it. But then don't tell the world you're doing it because you want to be enlightened. You want to enlighten yourself, get the dose smaller and smaller and smaller to the point where you can take half a puff of a joint and be on a journey for 3 hours, but be functional and be capable and enjoy it. That's where you want to get to. And that's when you're using the plant medicine as a tool to get you there.
I love it. Where can people find you if they want to connect with
I'm
you?
on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and doing my best to keep up with my social media presence. But I do answer all my messages myself. So just write me, just reach out to me, connect with me. If you want to know more about the work I do, just send me a message and check in.
Awesome. Well, it was awesome talking to you, and I'm gonna go out there and spend some time with my daughter and try to be present.
Awesome.
So
Enjoy
thank
it.
you so much, man. And I'll get you a copy over, okay?
Thanks so much.
All right,
All the best.
bye-bye.
Bye, Richard.
Well, that's a wrap. I hope you enjoyed the conversation. Please remember to rate, review, and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts from. Remember, go out and be the person that you want to meet.
Hey, go.